Hello friends, Nick here. Welcome back to MSFS Flight Plans, a place where you will never have as much fun flying around in amazing aircraft as we learn together about amazing locations all over the world. And please let me know if I'm wrong about that, because I want to know who has us beat. We are out here in the City of Angels today, and I had really big hopes and dreams about this trip until I got up in the air and was immediately reminded that we're not flying over Kansas out here. This is LA, and LA is about as tough as it gets when it comes to performance challenges, because there is a lot going on out here. And I was dead set on doing this one in a helicopter, also performance hog, so you can imagine how that worked out. We're going to have to make some compromises for this trip. For one thing, I think this will wind up being a 3-part tour, maybe two parts, but possibly 3, because I was able to milk different degrees of performance out of different choppers depending on the parts of town we were flying over, so we may hop into a different aircraft for this one and maybe the third one if we do a third. And secondly, this place is so massive that it would be at least a 2-hour flight if we tried to hit everything at once. And unfortunately, we still won't see everything even if we break it up like this. And lastly, there's only one in-sim helipad in this whole city, so I picked up a bunch of add-ons that will give us a lot more options. And of course, I wanted an excuse to try out a few of those guys as well. And we also had to heavily suppress our graphics settings, which shouldn't be a surprise, so we are going to see a lot of stuttering, freezing, vacant land off in the distance, popping, tiling, and all the other stuff that goes along with that. But despite all that, this is still going to be a pretty phenomenal circuit. The stuff that looks good looks really good and is totally worth a tour, even with the performance hurdles, so I hope you guys are going to be enjoying this just as much as I am. For this first leg, we are going to take the 500E by Cowansim, which looks a heck of a lot like that 530F that we took in that San Francisco flight. In fact, it looks so much like it that I thought it was the same one, and when I hopped in here, I could not figure out why all my camera settings hadn't saved. And then I realized it wasn't the same helicopter, which actually works out okay because this one starts up a lot faster, so that'll be cool. And while it's running up, we'll go ahead and get the GPS going. As usual, I will have this exact flight plan included in the video description, so if you know how to use little NavMap, you can pull it right in there and from there into the sim. And if you don't know how to use little NavMap, I've got a tutorial video that'll walk you through that whole process. Just scroll down through our video archives. In fact, I created a playlist with just one video in it. It's called How To. So if you go to our channel page, you'll be able to find it even quicker. Alright, so our only light on the annunciator is for the generator. We'll go ahead and get that on. Now we can turn the GPS on. And I won't really be relying on that because it's so small down there. I'll probably be looking to my left because I have little NavMap opened over there along with my notes, so that just works out pretty well. I have got a ton of add-ons on this trip, and I'm just going to put all of them in all of the videos, whether we have 2 or 3, just so you can go ahead and throw them all in your community folder. None of them are huge, and almost every one of them is also freeware. But the only payware one that I have is from Orbix, which includes several helipads all around the city. But I even threw a few freeware helipads in there too, if you don't want to have to pay for something to get more than one landing location. And when we get downtown, you'll see that pretty much every building has a helipad on top of it, so you can land on all of them. I tried landing on a few. They just don't look as good as the ones that have been touched up. All right, everything's looking pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and give it full throttle, and then we'll be on our way. And yes, we are tucked in between some hangars here, but all of the parking spots put us between hangars, so I made sure we could get up here without hitting anything. Alright, that all looks good. Everything appears to be in good order. Generator's on. We'll put our start pump off. And if you turn the landing light on, check this out. I think it turns the main spotlight on. Look how bright that is. It's high noon and that thing's still that bright. So we'll just leave that off so we don't blind anybody. Alright, let me get myself all situated here in my little sim pit so I'm not banging my knees and elbows and knuckles on everything. And I think we're in pretty good shape. You guys ready to go? Let's do this. So just so you kind of know where we're going, I didn't want to pull the Google map over for this flight because it's really just the city of Los Angeles. We're starting north of the city around the town of Santa Clarita, and there's just one thing that I want to show you guys out here that looks really good. It was one of the add-ons, but it's a little bit of a hike to get out there, but you're going to see once we get out there that it's definitely worth it. So once we get done with this, we'll head down into the San Fernando Valley, which is where Burbank and all the studios are. And we'll go check out Pasadena, where the Rose Bowl is. Look at the studios, look at some of the Hollywood Hills, and then we'll land right in downtown LA. And we'll probably start our second leg from there too. So this will be northern and central Los Angeles. The next one will be southern and western Los Angeles. And if we do a third one, it'll be deep south Los Angeles, down by Anaheim, so we can check out the parks down there. Out here, you're going to see some flat stuff. We'll fly over a place up here that's got a bunch of semi-trailers parked out there. You can see those cars are flat. But once we get over the more populated areas, it's all going to be photogrammetry, which adds to the performance issues, but does look fantastic once we get out there. So you'll just have to tolerate a little bit of flat stuff out here. And then once we get over the city, everything will look a lot better. So while we're on our way out to our first spot, I've had a few people, now that we've started flying helicopters on the channel. All right, close your eyes for about 30 seconds if you don't want to see a bunch of flat trucks up here. But people have started asking me some of my opinions about the helicopters now that I've kind of gotten into that a little bit. And I'm noticing a lot more people are starting to fly them in the sim, which I think is great because these things are a lot of fun. And one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, do you have the assist on? And I absolutely do. For those of you that are not flying these very much in the sim, there is a setting where it helps a lot as you're trying to learn how to fly these and get comfortable with them. That makes them a lot easier to control. So until I just get a little bit more airtime with these, I am flying with the assist on. Another thing that made it a lot easier for me is getting some proper helicopter controls. You've been watching for a while, you know that over Christmas I got myself some controls from Virpil, which included a flight stick, which can be used for more than just helicopters, of course, and also a collective. And I found that those made it a lot more fun to fly than trying to use the yoke and your throttles as a collective. But the collectives aren't cheap, so you can do it with the yoke and the throttles, but it is a lot more fun and enjoyable and easier if you at least have a stick of any kind. So you can use that for your cyclic and then your throttles again as your collective. But if you're going to do that, no matter what your gear looks like, make sure you go into the sim and change all of your controller settings to helicopter controls. They have specific controls for that. A lot of the stuff will work, but it'll work a lot better if you put it to helicopter controls. And if you don't want to scroll through all those to try to find out where they are, there's plenty of YouTube videos available that I would encourage you to utilize. It'll make that process a little bit easier as well. And don't forget your pedals. Don't forget the pedals. And when you're done, don't forget to switch everything back or you'll be crawling around under your desk like I was trying to figure out what got unplugged and why your pedals stopped working. All right, you can see that line right over there where the golf course or that little valley starts looking like grass. In fact, let's just go over there so we don't have to see this popping over here because that's where all the better graphics starts. And we won't have to deal with the popping or any of that stuff, and then we'll come back over here to our first landmark. All right, we'll pick up the speed just a little bit. As far as which helicopters to start with, because I have a bit of an obsession with everything I get into, I of course immediately bought every single one of the decent helicopters. Some of them in the sim marketplace are rated like 2, 2.8. I didn't pick up any of those because I didn't feel like it was worth the money if they weren't rated well by people that had owned them before. But I did get all of the other ones that were rated well, and not all of them are available in the sim marketplace. Some of them I had to go and get outside of the sim. And after now spending some time flying them all, I can tell you that you should not be afraid to start with the free ones in the sim if you're just trying to get your feet wet, because they are a little bit easier to fly. The system's depth is not nearly what it is with the payware ones. But again, if you're just trying to figure out if it's something you want to keep doing, that's a really good place to start. From there, if you want to buy a couple of them, I would suggest starting with that one we flew, any of these I'm about to mention. The one we flew in New York City, which is the Mini 500 from Got Friends, because it's very simple and has a huge window, which makes it a lot easier to land, which is by far the hardest part of flying these things. And then I might pick up this one, which is from Cowansim. This is the 500E, or that Shrike, which looks almost identical to this, which is the 530F. Let me get over here so we're away from the bad landscape again. All of those are simple. All of them have huge windows and are great starters. Moving beyond that, I really enjoy flying all the Cowansim offerings right now. I feel like they're all just a little bit easier. Maybe some of the fancier ones, which can be... Boy, look at that landscape. That is just a disaster. That goes to nothing. I'm guessing it's an older map over a newer map, or vice versa. But the Cowansims all just seem really smooth to me. Now, guys that actually fly helicopters might like the enhanced realism of some of the others. I found the others are very difficult to fly compared to everything from Cowansim. I look forward to mastering them, but for now, for starting, I find myself coming back to the Cowansim stuff over and over again. So I don't think you can go wrong with any of those. And there's even a couple of, at least 3, I think, freeware choppers that you can get from flightsim.to. And you can get them up in the air. Some of them you can't actually manually start. A lot of the buttons don't work. But again, if you're just wanting to kind of fly them and see what it's like, check some of those out too if you don't want to spend any money. But I am having a lot of fun flying these. I also got that one from AnyBuilds that was just added to the sim. But I cannot get that to start without pushing Control-Alt-E or Control-Shift-E. because something's going on with that. I watched a bunch of tutorials, and I'm obviously doing something wrong because I can't get it started, so I don't really have any opinions on that until I can figure out how that's not working. But that one should also be pretty easy too. It's about as basic as it gets, and it also has a gigantic window, which will make those landings a lot easier. Alright, I think we're leaving the nasty stuff behind now. And if you wanted to, it's too far out of the way for us here, but over here there's a gigantic dam that just looks okay, but if you like dams like I do, it might be worth flying over there to check it out. You can just see the lake that's dammed up behind it over there. But the dam's right over here, but it's about, I don't know, 8 miles from where we're going, which is right up here, so we're not going to fly over there. But look at those neighborhoods down there. Look at that little strip center. Looks amazing. Alright, so this is Santa Clarita. Actually, we're just a little bit north of Santa Clarita now. And we're heading over to Six Flags Magic Mountain Park, which is an in-sim mod, and it is freeware, and it will be linked in the video description, and this might be one of the best theme parks we've seen in the sim so far. And I was a little surprised to discover this place was built in 1971. And just by looking at all those houses on the ground on there, I would assume that when they started building this place, there wasn't much else out here. And I'm intentionally keeping it behind that pillar right now because I want to surprise you with how amazing it looks once we get on top of it. But judging by how expensive it probably would be even back in the 70s to get land this close to LA, I'm guessing that's probably why they threw this thing out here. And that's probably why everything else came out here, because I bet there were a lot of people driving out here to visit this park. And when they originally built it, it was just called Magic Mountain. Six Flags bought it in 1979. And then, of course, I had to go see when the first Six Flags was built, because I lived by a big one in Arlington, Texas, when I lived out there for 8 years, from 1976 to 1984. And it turns out that's also the oldest one, built in 1961. That's where I rode my first big boy roller coaster, the Judge Roy Scream, which still exists out there. I remember how terrified I was, and then I looked at what the top speed on that is, 45 miles an hour, which is practically a crawl by today's standards. All right, so there's the park, and right on this corner, just to the left of that first white-looking roller coaster, is their little water park. They got a water park down there called Hurricane Harbor. And over the years, this place has grabbed a few records as well. For a while, they had three of the tallest roller coasters ever built until they were surpassed by others. Longest and fastest in 3 different categories. And right now they still have the tallest pendulum ride, which is probably one of those big swinging ship things, and the biggest pretzel loop for any roller coaster. Look at how unbelievably detailed that is. Never mind the roller coasters. Look at all that junk and stuff down there by those trailers, the cars. You're going to see some little umbrellas by the picnic area up here. Little arcade area. Looks amazing. Look at that. Absolutely unbelievable. And their iconic big red tower, which I think all the parks have, at least all of them that I've been to have had that big red tower. Look at that. Superb. Absolutely love it. And if I could do this flight all over again, or if maybe there was another airport anywhere around here and there's not, I wouldn't have taken you guys over that area that didn't look so good, but that was the only way to get out here. So that's what we did. Alright, this road running to our left down towards the crest of that mountain over there is Interstate 5, and I think it's the only road that runs down into the city from here. They got some little roads running through these mountains, but I don't even know if they're actually roads. They might be like hiking trails because they look really small, so I think unless you want to add a couple hours to your trip, that would be the way you'd be heading down to the bigger part of the city. And these mountains right here in front of us are called the Santa Susana Mountains. And I'm not going to take this road over the mountain pass because as it cuts through the mountains, it starts to get a little bit funky looking where it gets all twisty and turvy and wrapping around the landscape, so I will spare you that. But the main reason I'm flying out here is because I found a really cool site that I want to show you guys. And these mountains look good too. Look at these neighborhoods. Amazing. I didn't even turn the clouds on because turning them off gave me about 3 more frames per second, and I'm trying to milk everything I can get out of this thing. Now that's kind of interesting. Look at that terracing on that hill down there. And by the way, if you haven't checked the news lately, this whole area is experiencing some massive flash flooding right now. And once we come over these mountains and enter the San Fernando Valley, you will see something we don't see in a lot of cities that they have a lot of out here in LA. Those are big runoff control canals that run all throughout the city. And we're also going to see on the eastern side of the valley up here, we're going to fly right over it. They've got a big retention area with a big dam on it. to catch all the runoff coming down from the mountains, which looks really cool in the sim. So we'll check that out. All right, the site I'm going to show you once we get over here is an old Nike missile launch facility. One of 16 they placed around LA back in the day, which is kind of funny because we saw a lot of those out in San Francisco too, if you remember. And if you haven't seen that flight yet, you should check it out. Really good. And now that we're seeing so many of these things, my curiosity was piqued enough that I had to look into the Nike missiles a little bit more, and it turns out that what I thought they were is not accurate. You may recall in that San Francisco flight, I was hypothesizing that there were so many out here because it was so close to Russia. I thought they were ICBMs that were meant to travel over there and strike Russia if they wanted to. But it turns out they were used for anti-aircraft purposes. And before they came up with those things, they actually started designing them in the 1940s with the intention of replacing traditional anti-aircraft cannons, which, if you were lucky, might hit something with several thousands of shots. But the concern once the Cold War got started is that if you missed any of those Soviet bombers coming through, they might be carrying nukes, and that would be a big problem. So as the stabilization systems for long-range missiles improved and radar systems improved, they started building these things, which were radar-based. And the way that if you look at the sites that are out here, or remnants of them, you'll see that some were launch areas, and then further away from those would be where the radar stations were, because they couldn't have the radar stations right next to the launch area because they couldn't track the missiles fast enough. So they would never have the big radar domes and antennas near where they were launching the missiles from. But initially when they made these, they had a range of about 45 kilometers, and they used conventional explosives, which probably would have worked, assuming they could have hit something. But then they started worrying about the potential for getting swarms of bombers coming through with not gravity bombs, but long-range missiles attached to those guys. So the next iteration after the Ajax version, which was the first one, was called the Hercules series. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. So the launch area was the one on the far side over here, and I'm going to get close enough to see if we can see some graffiti that's spray painted on the ground next to him. Not this first one here, but that next one on the other side. Let's see if we can spot it. All right, see that white stuff just over our circular window right there? That's a bunch of graffiti on there. Can we read it? Nope, can't really see it. And it looks a little flat. So once they got to the Hercules version, those things could travel about 150 kilometers in speeds in excess of Mach 3. And those were not conventional warheads. They put nukes on the tips of those, and the biggest payloads they could haul were 40 kilotons, which would definitely do some damage. Oh no, another warped flat area. Alright, well, let's just get over this. Maybe there's something out there we can look at. There, that's more like it. Whew. I just don't understand the rhyme or reason why a little area like that would look like this, and then surrounding it, completely surrounding it, is back to the photogrammetry stuff. I don't know why it would catch some areas but not others, but obviously this is all still under construction, so maybe it has something to do with updates on the satellite maps. I don't know. Alright, so here we are in the San Fernando Valley, and we're going to weave our way between 3 airports they have out here, all very close to each other. The first one will be to our right. That is the Van Nuys Airport. And then we're going to fly east towards Whiteman before we cut into a little valley over here. And the biggest one out here is Bob Hope, which is pretty much directly off of our nose at this point by that opening in the valley over there. And let's see, right below us right now is one of the water control canals. You can see the road running next to it there because it has lines in it, and then all the bridges going over that bigger one. And that's one of the canals, which I bet is just raging right now. Yeah, you see off in the distance. Can't see very much elevation because of the train level of detail having to be under 200 for this flight just to not stutter our way through it. And then we'll see this dam on the other side right before we cut to that valley. In fact, let's start aiming that direction. So a little bit about the Bob Hope Airport, which I thought was the most interesting of the 3, also known as Hollywood Burbank today. They opened that thing in 1930, and I read that if you like smaller crowds and cheaper fares, well, maybe not too much cheaper, but they say that this area, if you're trying to just go to the studios and the stuff out on this side of town, is a little bit better than heading into LAX because it's significantly less traffic. But when they built that, planes were mostly tail draggers, And the brake systems, if they had any at all, didn't work very well, so they weren't using asphalt runways or cement runways. They made them out of compacted sand mixed with oil, about 5 inches deep, just to help everybody slow down once they touch down. And it seems like anyone who has moved out here since they built that thing probably had not considered the fact that you live between 3 airports in the middle of a valley, because as of 2019, they've had over 3.5 million noise complaints about the planes flying overhead. And I read that in recent years, airport staff has said that about 90% of those complaints have come from 45 people, which for some reason I just find absolutely hilarious. I bet those would be some really fun people to hang around with. 45 people. I wonder how many total complaints those account for. Alright, so Van Nuys is that one right there, off to our right. And we'll see Whiteman right off to our left, and Bob Hope is that big area. Here, let me just grab the stick with my left hand. Bob Hope's going to be right over here. We'll try to remember to take a look at that out of the right side. Actually, it's probably more in this area here. So here's all the studios. We're going to come down this valley here, check out Pasadena, the Rose Bowl, come up around this way, check out the studios, head over Beverly Hills, check out the Hollywood sign, of course, and then we're going to land right down here in the skyscraper area of downtown LA. I'm just going to trim up a little bit because I'm having to apply some constant back pressure on the stick. Alright, this thing right up here is called the Hansen Dam. And then here's the other airport right here. Let's try not to fly right over the runway. And what's interesting about this, they've really done a great job with the way that the relief looks and the detail looks for the runoff area coming down from these mountains. We'll get a great look at it here in just a second. But it looks like as all that is washing down, the intention of this dam is just to collect it and then let it go through a little spillway they're going to have right on the front of it in the middle up here. So they can control the outflow of that thing. But it's going to look fantastic. But look behind it there. You'll see that they have quite a few structures that are built awfully close to where you would think the water would back up, like right over here. Sorry about the freezing, guys. Nothing we can do about that. I don't like it any more than you do. I tried flying some planes out here. It was just as bad as the helicopters. The only thing I could get to be manageable was the 172. The steam gauge version of it. So, good luck flying anything else. You're just going to have to turn everything down and deal with just a little bit of that stuff. But look how good this looks right here. Just amazing. And wait till you see the runoff area up here. It looks so good. Look at this junkyard down here. Look at that. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. All this stuff up here. Love that. Now look at this, they got some more stuff right here too, so I'm guessing they wouldn't let it get so full that it endangers that stuff, which is probably why they have this little spillway right here. Alright, dead ahead of us are the San Gabriel Mountains, and then off to the right over there are the Verdungo Mountains. Look at that little pit mine there. Looks amazingly good. Just perfect. Alright, I gotta trim up some more. My forearm's getting tired of holding the stick back. Yeah, if you look real close, you see those little pillar trees they got down there. I'm just trying to stay high enough so we don't really notice it too much, because you get just high enough in these photogrammetry areas and it looks really good. So these mountains in front of us, which again are the San Gabriels, are bordered to the north and the east by the notorious San Andreas Fault, which has broken more than its fair share of fragile objects perched precariously on shelves out here, I'm sure, over the years. Giving everyone one more thing to worry about, along with noisy planes. Okay, so here's this washout area here. Look at this. You can see how it's just all come running down from those mountains. Look at that. And I bet that is just an absolute raging rapid right now. And if you look at the Google map right now, they even have a flash flood warning right smack over this area out here right now. Boy, those bridges look a little bit close to where that water would run through too, don't they, as far as not being too high off the ground. And now that we've flown over so many areas, and now that I know for a lot of them when the neighborhoods were built up, I've gotten a little bit better at trying to determine just how old a lot of these neighborhoods are. If you were thinking to look, which I'm sure you weren't because I didn't draw attention to it, while we were up in the area by Six Flags, all of the roofs on newer houses have very similar shading on them. And I found when you get out to older areas like this, you can see the roofs are all different colors, ranging from white to gray to brown to red, which is usually a sign of a neighborhood that's probably over 20 years old, I would say. And a lot of those studios down there, as you'll find out in just a minute, were starting to get built up in the 1920s and 30s. I'm going to guess that a lot of this isn't quite that old, but I would bet this is probably 70s and 80s maybe. And everything up by Santa Clarita, I'm going to guess, was probably the last 20 years. Just judging by those neighborhoods. All right, in just a second, you're going to see a little opening appear over to the right after this next ridge. And that's going to be the site of the town of Chevy Chase. And no, that is not how the comedian got his name. Cornelius Crane Chase, which is his real name, is not from LA, he's from Manhattan. And he got his stage name of Chevy Chase from his grandmother. It sounds like it was a nickname she'd given him when he was younger, and she got that from an old English ballad of the same name, the Ballad of Chevy Chase. And I'm sorry to report I could not find out how this place out here, which is just off the top of our glare shield there, got its name. But because these mountains to our left are so close to that fault line, they're pretty young by geological standards, only about 6 million years old. And if you go a little bit further south, we're not going to cruise down there, you would be able to check out the Mount Wilson Observatory, which was opened in 1904, and there is an add-on available for that, which I did not include since we're not going to be looking at it, but if you look at flightsim.to, it looks fantastic, so it might be worth a trip out there. So they opened that place in 1904, and they built a 60-inch telescope in 1908, which was the largest in the world until they outdid themselves with the 100-inch Hooker telescope, which opened in 1917, and that one was the largest in the world until 1949. And if you recall the other places where we've seen big observatories, they were all much, much higher up than these, with the exception of that one in South Africa that was like at sea level. But there's something about the air out here that forms an inversion layer that traps all of the warm air and the smog down over the city, which is great for astronomy, not great for living in the city. But they say the air out here is some of the most stable in the entire country, despite the observatory being at around 5,000 feet, which I found very interesting, because you would think something that low. They are having problems with the light pollution, though. I imagine it's a lot brighter out here than when they built that place in the early 1900s. But it is a neat-looking complex. And the highest point in this range is a place called Mount San Antonio, known as Mount Baldy by the locals, because when you look at it from the city, there's no trees on the top of it. And it peaks out at around 10,000 feet. I think they have a big ski complex up there, too. All right, in just a second, we're going to see the Rose Bowl down to our left. That was built in 1922, and currently the 16th largest in the world with a capacity of 92,000. And of course, that is the home of the annual Rose Bowl game and the home stadium of the UCLA Bruins. And their campus is about 15 miles or so southwest of here. We won't see that on this trip, but of course we'll check it out for our next one. Which seems like kind of a hike to get all the way from down there to up here. But if you got a big stadium already there, and considering the price of real estate, I get it. All right, I'm going to swing out a little bit just to make sure we can get a good look at this bad boy. And if you look right down in the front of it, which will be on the other side as we fly by, you can even see the big rose insignia painted right in front of the gate for the place. All right, that's it right up there, right off the top of our glare shield on the other side of that golf course. Right up here is where it's going to be. And if anyone's from around here, let me know if this is a garbage dump. I'm thinking that's probably what that is, because it looks a lot like one. And even though it is an eyesore from up here, if you're on the ground, you'd never see it, so it seemed like a pretty good spot, and the smell probably wouldn't be so bad if you had it up above where everybody was living. But I'm going to guess that's probably one of the big dumps out here. Of course, the first time I flew out here, I had to land right in the middle of the Rose Bowl. And that's another one when you get real close. From where we're at, it'll look pretty good, but once you get real close, it starts to get a little bit wonky looking. Golf course looks amazing. And there's downtown LA. That's going to be our destination for this trip. Well, look at that. Looks like they're having a little festival of some kind. Look at all the little tents and gazebos they got set up down there. Some of those in that little area off to the left of the parking lot there. All right, so the rose painting, which you will not miss, is on the other side. So there's the main south gate, I guess, right there. And then right around the side of these trees, if you look down there, you'll see the big rose. There it is. See it? Awesome. And check out these bridges up here. Oh boy, we're going fast. We're overspeeding. All right, let's just chill that out a little bit. I can hear that wind ripping. Look at these bridges. Unfortunately, they're filled in underneath, but those are pretty cool looking, aren't they? All right, we're going to head over to Burbank now, where all the studios are, among other things. And along the way, we're going to pass by 2 cemeteries. And I think both of them may be called Forest Lawn, which made it very difficult to tell who's in there because it just says Forest Lawn. I know this one's definitely called Forest Lawn. I think the next one's called Mount Sinai, but a portion of that's also called Forest Lawn. But the other one is right next to the studios, so I think most of the now deceased celebrities are in that one, not this first one. But there are quite a few in this one too, but they are folks that have died a while back. So right in front of us is the Hollywood Hills. We'll check that out. We'll cruise over the top of that. All right, so right off the top of our glare shield there, off that left corner of it, is one of the Forest Lawn cemeteries. And we're going to see a place on top of a hill on this side of it called the Forest Lawn Museum. And they just said they have kind of rotating exhibits in there, so I'm not sure exactly what they're using that for, but it's a neat looking place. We'll take a look at that as we come by. And the zoo, there's going to be a big golf course right here. The LA Zoo is right here. We won't really see any of that. There's too many trees. But right here is their parking lot, and on this side of it is the Autry Museum, and you know what that's named after, of the American West. And the zoo opened in 1966, and the Autry Museum opened in 1988. So there's the cemetery. I think the building we can see right now on this side is a mausoleum complex, and then the museum is going to appear just on the other side of our pillar here. Right there. There it is. See that? With that parking lot up there? Look at that stuff. Looks amazing. Yeah, if you just focus on the stuff right underneath the helicopter, which I don't always do, you don't notice all the desolation off in the distance because of what we had to do with the terrain level of detail. But it sure does look good down there, doesn't it? Unbelievable. So for our next flight, we may even take off from the same spot we're going to land at because there's a lot of stuff to see downtown that we're just not going to have time for on this trip. But we're going to cruise down here, look at the Sunset Strip, Rodeo Drive, the Walk of Fame, head all the way down here, look at the Getty Museum, check out Venice Beach and all that, and then come up here, check out some of the big stadiums. So every part of the city, there's some pretty cool stuff to look at. Okay, this little... Well, it's going to go behind the pillar now. Let's just cruise around here a little bit. So the zoo is all up in here, and obviously you really can't see anything. There's the museum, the Autry Museum there. There's a parking lot for the zoo, which looks great. Really great. And I'm not sure what that is. They've cleared it all off and terraced it. Maybe that used to be a dump too. Although that would seem like a weird spot to put it because that's the pretty high-end real estate there. The Hollywood sign is going to be right on the other side of this tower. We'll take a nice look at that as we come around. And this thing here is called the Griffith Park Equestrian Center. And that thing is big. I read they have 500 boarding stalls in that. But not the biggest in the world. We flew near that one before. That one's in Ocala. You saw our swamp tour. There's another one of those big canals. And that one does have some water and some trees. So maybe they got a little dirt collecting down there too. And there's that other cemetery. So it said Mount Sinai over this area, and then it said Forest Lawn again over here. But there are a lot of celebrities in that place. And they had something down here called the Equidome, which they said is like a 3,500 capacity arena to watch horse-related things, and that might be it, although it's certainly not a dome, but I don't see anything big enough to look like that unless that's it over there. All right, so here come the studios. This one here is going to be Disney Studios. And Disney has bought up a lot of stuff. Now they've taken over 20th Century Fox. And we'll see the old Fox Studios on our next trip. And then there's a little open space right here. And then this smaller section here is the Burbank Studios. And if you grew up in the 80s, you know that pretty much every game show, every sitcom was filmed right down in here. Not every one of them, but a lot of them. I can remember watching those old game shows and hearing them say at the end, filmed in Burbank Studios in Burbank, California. That's where they were doing that. And these are the iconic Warner Brothers studios right out here. And they started filming down there in 1926. And there's their water tower. Very famous water tower. And then right over here we will see the Universal Studios and the Universal Studios theme park out here. And if you thought Warner Brothers was old, they started filming at Universal in 1912. And it was on the site of a working farm. And they had to shut the farm down once they went from silent pictures to the talkies because the studios weren't soundproof enough to keep the noise from bleeding in. So they had to nix that. In the 1960s, they started offering tram rides around the back lot, which eventually grew into the Universal Studios theme park. And that's the theme park right there. Here's all their studios. And this place is microscopic compared to that one they built out in Orlando. If you saw that trip, you know that that place was huge. They just have a few rides down there. But that looks awesome. Alright, so these are the Hollywood Hills we're flying over now, which has far too many celebrities living out here to even begin to mention. So just know that the stuff we're flying over now is where they're all living. More of them on the other side, I think, but there's probably quite a few that live out here too. Let's look at that theme park again. 1912, man. I mean, I guess I knew they were making movies back then. I just didn't think it was organized enough to have a big studio park like that. I think that body of water over there is called the Hollywood Reservoir, and there's a nice dam on the other side of it. We'll see if we can take a look at that too. But we will see the Hollywood Hills sign. You can just barely see it right there. We'll get a nice look at it from the side. Well, we are looking at it from the side now, but from the front, I guess, here in just a second. And they built that thing in 1923, the first version of it, which was wood with sheet metal around the outsides of it. And originally it said Hollywood Land, and it was used to advertise a development they were building out here. And if you're over 100 years old and were living out here back then, you would recall that it would flash sequentially Holly, then Wood, and then Land. And then it kind of fell into disrepair. Some of the letters got blown over and broken. There's that dam. You see it there? So there's the sign. So they completely rebuilt it in 1949. That one started falling apart again. And they took the land part of it off. That's what they did in 49. And then 1978, they made concrete bases and made the whole thing steel. And that was spearheaded by none other than Alice Cooper. And as the years rolled by, they thought all the original letters had been completely lost to history. And then the letter H showed up on eBay in 2005. I guess some artist bought it and did something with it, but whatever he did with it wasn't interesting enough for me to chase down that rabbit hole. But I guess you could go see the most iconic letter H in the world somewhere if you wanted to find it. All right, here's the Griffith Observatory with the world's most look-through telescope. Over 7 million people have peeped through the 12-inch Zeiss refractor since they opened it down there in 1935. And they started building that in 1933 as a WPA project. We've seen quite a few of those on our flights so far. And we'll see another one when we hit Vegas here before too long. Look at that. It looks beautiful. That is an in-sim mod, so you don't need an add-on for that one. If you find one, don't put it in or you'll have trouble. And there's a Hollywood sign mod also. Don't put that in. It's a freeware or it'll double up your sign. It looks okay as it is now. Okay, so we're just going to come out here a little bit and then we're going to get turned around and take a look at Dodger Stadium before we come in for our approach. But we need to get out here just a little bit so we can get a good angle of approach to it. Boy, there are a lot of trees in that water canal. I don't know if that's true to life or not, but that seems like a lot of trees for the kind of water that probably runs through that thing. Alright, I need to start using both of my hands again, so I'm just going to try to kind of steer your eyeballs in the direction of what we're looking at, but right over the top of our glare shield there is Dodger Stadium. And that was opened in 1962 and is now the third oldest park in the U.S. for baseball. After, take your guess, Wrigley Field and Fenway, both of which we've also seen on previous flights. Wrigley, of course, in Chicago, and Fenway, home of the Boston Red Sox. And this is also the largest baseball park in the world, with a capacity of 56,000. And on our Miami flight, I had said that the place where the Marlins are playing is the smallest. But as I was looking at the list for this place, it turns out that also in Florida, over in Tampa, the Tropicana field is the smallest. I think the capacity of the Tropicana was around 20,000 or something like that. It was pretty small. Both of them are half the size of this place, but this place is big. And it's going to look great. And this is also a freeware mod for this place. And what's kind of neat, I guess I'd never really taken a close enough look at it. It appears, and I haven't been here in real life, so I don't know, that the other side of it is kind of dug into the ground a little bit. It almost seems like the top of the bleacher area is almost level with that parking lot behind home plate there, which is kind of interesting. All right, again, there's all kinds of sites around downtown LA here. We'll hit all of those when we take off from the same spot for our next flight, but let me just tell you about the place we're landing on. It's that big, tall building right in front of us there, that white one, and that is the U.S. Bank Tower, which opened in 1989. And that is now the second tallest at 1,018 feet. And in 2017, they opened the Wilshire Grand, which built it out by about 100 feet, and I think it's that next one right there with kind of the angled top on it. Right above our center bar right there, to the left of the glare shield. But for a building that opened in 1989, this has a very Art Deco-like appearance, which I really like. Kind of a timeless look to it. And this is not only the only available helipad in the sim if you don't have any add-ons in, but as you know, if you ever fly helicopters, one of the few in the world, which is just too bad. All right, so let's get this thing down, and then I'll pull over a little nav map. As always, we'll take a look at some of this stuff in a little bit more detail, and then we'll wrap it up. See, just look on top of any of these buildings. Every one of them has a helipad on it. So take your pick. And they all look good from here, but when you get right down on top of them, they don't look as good as this one. Although some of them might be included in some of the add-ons that I linked, so maybe some of those do look a little bit better now. But this one does look good. And you can see why it helps to have big windows on these things. All right, let me concentrate for just a second. Even talking is just too much. All right, come on down, baby. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get her shut down, and then we'll take a look at a little nav map. And the easiest way to do that is just cut the throttle off. Have to unlock it. And then shut off the fuel, and we'll hit the rudder brake just so it's not super noisy. Get everything shut down. All right. Centering off. Okay, so just to kind of give you a sense of how big LA is, Anaheim, which is where the Disneyland parks are, is going to be way down here. We'll take that probably on our southern trip. I'm thinking for that one, we'll leave down here by the ports because they modded that stuff up. And then cruise over there. But for the next one, we're going to take off in the same spot. And look at all these bookmarks we have to hit out here. So we'll check out all this stuff. Venice Beach is down here. The Getty, Playboy Mansion. You guys don't want to miss that. And before I do anything else, I reached out to Freaky D. You guys know how much I love him. And I said, in that last flight over Miami, I said, I need to find out how I can buy that guy coffee. Send him something. We use so many of his add-ons for every flight pretty much. And so I did. I reached out to him and I said, hey, man, I want to send you a tip. How can I do that? And he said, that's not necessary. I do it for the fun of it. He didn't say that, but I know that's what he meant, which is just awesome. These guys are unbelievable. So in light of that, I'm going to start giving a shout out to all the modders who've made stuff for each of our flights. And for this one, before we go any further, Freaky D, once again, several of the add-ons in this trip are Freaky D. Seneca Driver, The White Arcades, Mr. Coffee, Urban Hunter, DVA, and AnyBuilds, who actually has right now on SimMarket a free Venice Beach mod. So go ahead and check that out. It looked like in the in-sim marketplace it was not free, but you can go to SimMarket right now and download that for free. So pick it up, just kind of set it on the side, so if you're flying out here, you can use it. Okay, so here's where we left from, Agua Dulce, which again is the only airport in this vicinity. I guess we could have come from over here, but that one's even a little bit closer, and I'm guessing in English that probably means sweet water. Came down here, and you know what? If I followed our flight plan, I might have avoided some of that stuff that we saw out there that was kind of flat, because I think this looked pretty good out here. But we came out here to check out Six Flags, which looked just unfreaking believable. Amazingly good. That was awesome. Totally worth the extra few minutes we had to fly out there to check that out. Came over the mountains here, the Santa Susanas, and here's that Nike missile launch site. And there is the graffiti I was looking for. And even in the sim here, ooh, I didn't notice that one. That was bigger. You can't even really tell what it says. But I'm guessing that's where they launched the missiles from, because that kind of looks like a launch pad area. Was that, a basketball court or something? I guess you probably get bored out there. And let me show you just a couple of others. So this was one of the control sites. Remember I said they would actually have the radar stations at a different location. They had to keep them further away from the missiles. And it looks like they have a helipad out there. This is one of the control sites. And then they have another. Oh, that's just the mountains marker. I tried to put a few of them out here. That's Mount Wilson. Where's some of the others? Well, if you look around, just look at a map, you can see they're ringing the entire city where those launch sites were. So here's the Van Nuys Airport here. This is the San Fernando Valley. And here's the Bob Hope Airport. Look at how close these are. I mean, can you imagine if you lived right down in here, how noisy that would actually be? But again, if you're going to move out there, I'm sure you would not be surprised, because if you just drive through there once, I'm sure you hear a lot of planes flying over. And here's Whiteman, and here is that dam, the Hansen Dam, which looked just like that and amazing. And there was even a little bit of water in there too, which is great. So I'm guessing, I mean, it's probably more angled down than we could even tell in the sim. So the water probably just kind of pools up around here, because they would not have built this stuff if there was any threat of that going under. And this runoff area looked just like that, which is awesome. Check that out. Very cool. And here's the town of Chevy Chase out here. And let me just show you where the Mount Wilson Observatory is if you want to go check it out. Not too far off the beaten path that we were traveling down, but that's it right there. And again, there is a freeware add-on available for that, which I did not link, so just search for Mount Wilson Observatory. And there's the Rose Bowl. And there's the Rose for the Rose Bowl. Yeah, they must have had a little something going on, because they had little tents and everything set up out here, all around here. Looked awesome. And that bridge, here's that bridge. I need to go back and look at that, because you couldn't even tell by looking at the top of this that it had those little trusses under it, those arches. You can kind of tell on that one, I guess. I need to see what that was all about, because that looked really cool. And here's one of the forest lawn cemeteries out here. And then here's where Burbank starts. So here's the zoo. You can see a lot more of it from directly overhead. Again, you couldn't see anything in the sim. There's just too many trees. There's the Autry Museum of the West right there. Here's the Equestrian Center. And Disney Studios. Burbank Studios. And the only thing that I could tell that they're still filming down there is Days of Our Lives. It didn't say they were filming anything else down there, but you can tell they don't really have a lot of buildings. Not like they do at Warner Brothers here. Look at this. A lot of stuff down there. And there's their famous water tower, which you could see in the sim. And then here's Universal out here. And then here's all their studios. And you can tell the theme park area is really small. I mean, all this stuff here is parking, so it's a pretty tight little area, especially compared to what was going on down in Orlando. Came over the Hollywood Hills here. Don't do any peeking. Don't peek down there at the stuff we're going to see on our next trip. I forgot to look for this thing. You can see it in the sim. I just didn't point it out when we flew over because we were looking at the sign. But that's the Hollywood Bowl, which also opened in 1930. Big amphitheater. There's the sign up there, which, again, looking down the top of it, you can't even see it. And then here's the Griffith Observatory, which looked absolutely phenomenal. And I forgot to mention the Greek Theater, too, which you can also see. But not as good as that. That kind of steals the show in this area. Then we came out here, circled around, and took a look at Dodger Stadium. And that looks a little bit funny, doesn't it? It almost looks like it's fish-eyed, but I think that's just because of the way that these bushes are lined up like that, these trees. And you really can't tell here from the top that this is so much higher elevated than this area back here appears to be, if that was accurate in the sim. But that's neat. Biggest baseball stadium in the world. And boy, do they have a lot of parking. Holy smokes, look at that. I'm sorry, I got to look at this real quick. So look what they have at the Rose Bowl. Someone's making a lot of money on bus rides over here. Look at that versus what they got going on down here. And that Rose Bowl has twice the capacity of this place. Look at all this parking. I bet people park here and take a bus over the Rose Bowl, because look at that. That's ridiculous. Okay, and then we came to downtown LA, and look at these buildings. Every one of them has a helicopter pad. Boom, 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 all over the place. Again, you can land in any of them. I think I landed on quite a few before, so they all are solid. They just don't look that great when you get right on top of it. And there's the U.S. Bank building. So when we take off next time, we're going to come over here just to kind of give you an idea of what's in store. All kinds of really cool stuff over here. There's a Union Station, the town hall's down there. They got a big opera house that looks cool. A bunch more stadiums over here, convention center. And I need to try to get over here because this is where the La Brea tar pits are. But this area down here looks really cool too, because this is where the Memorial Coliseum is and all that stuff. That's the USC campus there. So I don't know. We'll probably come out here, check out Hollywood Drive and Rodeo Drive, Sunset Strip, and all that kind of stuff. So we'll probably just circle around this way maybe. We got to check out Venice Beach, and then maybe come up here. There's got to be another heliport out here. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. So stay tuned, guys. We are now officially at less than 90 people till we get to 1,000 subs. Once we get there, the Discord server will be open, and we'll be able to do all kinds of stuff with that too. So we're rapidly approaching it. Can't wait. Had an absolute blast as always, guys. I'll see you in just a few days. I've already got some of my notes drawn out for that next flight, and I just can't wait to see you all in the skies. Later.